debate did not go at all how I expected. I don't know what I expected. I kind of expected Alex to do a good job. I expected Ubi to do a great job because I don't know much of his work, but I've heard that he's just a really smart dude. So I was worried for Alex. I thought, okay, he'll probably get in there. He'll probably survive, but I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know how things are going to look after this is all said and done. But I was really shocked at how things went down. Really, really shocked. I'm not going to say who I thought won just yet. Uh, and I mean, what does it really matter? But this was, yeah, I don't even have words. This was a crazy debate. It got very heated, and we're going to see some of that right now. So the premise of the debate was, is the Orthodox Church the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church? Now, this is really focused on the one and Catholic aspects of things because nobody really disputes that the Orthodox churches are apostolic and nobody disputes that they're holy, which you could interpret to mean that they have valid sacraments. So, of course, the Orthodox churches are holy and apostolic, but are they one and are they Catholic? So this is a huge reason that I mentioned for why I'm not Eastern Orthodox, and I'm not going to rehash it, but a big part of it, and a big part of the reason that a lot of people give is they're not united. Like if you become part of one Orthodox church, you can't necessarily receive communion at other Orthodox churches, and and you're also not going to find an Orthodox church everywhere on the planet, which means they're not universal. So these two things are big obstacles for a lot of people that are considering Orthodoxy. So it's an important debate. Um, so let's hear a little bit of Ubie's opening statement, and then I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'll play a little bit, and then I can give kind of a summary of what he was saying in his entire opening statement. But I really encourage everybody to go watch it. It's on Ubi Petrus's channel, so go and watch it. It's really good debate. I learned a lot. Okay, let's watch part of his opening statement here.
The definitions of that, specifically one and Catholic. And I want to begin with two quotations from the late Pope Benedict XVI. The first is from the work Principles of Catholic Theology. Quote, "Rome must not require more from the East with respect to the doctrine of primacy than what had been formulated and was lived in the first millennium." When Athenagoras designated him as the successor of St. Peter, as the most esteemed among us, as one who presides in charity, this great church leader was expressing the ecclesial content of the doctrine of the primacy as it was known in the first millennium. Rome need not ask for more. Reunion could take place in this context if, on the one hand, the East would cease to oppose as heretical the developments that took place in the West in the second millennium and would accept the Catholic Church as legitimate and orthodox in the form she had acquired in the course of that development, while on the other hand, the West would recognize the Church of the East as orthodox and legitimate in the form she has always had. I want to repeat that. She has always had. Notice that verb tense.
So this whole quote, the point he's trying to make is that even Pope Benedict XVI recognizes that the Orthodox Church has not changed over time, and he also recognizes that the Catholic Church has changed over time. It's developed, as we might say, as Catholics. And I kind of I don't see an issue with that. Orthodox Christians like to kind of pound their chest about, well, we haven't changed, we're static. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, there are a lot of things that have happened since the schism that maybe it makes sense to develop some theology about. And if you don't have any theology about that, or you haven't, progressed, or I guess you could say there's a balance to be made between progressivism, which should be rejected outright because that is progress for the sake of progress. But there's also something to be said about not staying stagnant for the sake of being stagnant. There are some things that should remain stagnant, obviously. Those are the dogmas. But other things, we should kind of, look around us and see, okay, well, IVF is a problem. Artificial birth control, or contraception is a problem. AI is a problem. Like, we need to develop theologies about these things. We may need to have councils to talk about some of this stuff. We may need papal documents to talk about some of these things. If you're not able to have universal statements about some of these pressing issues that are happening in our time, then yeah, you're going to be stagnant, but it's not in a good way. I don't see how that could be something to brag about, really. But that's what he's trying to get at with these quotes. So even Pope Benedict says that Catholicism has developed and the Orthodox churches have remained stagnant, I guess you could say.
So for Pope Benedict XVI, it is the papal church that has developed, not the Orthodox church, which has remained in the form we have now. In addition to having been pope, Benedict had been the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, formerly known as the Inquisition. So this is not a nobody. This is not a random bishop of a titular see. This is someone who understood Roman Catholic theology better than really anyone else. In an interview, he is asked how communications with the Orthodox Church have gone, and in his response, he expresses sentiments similar to what he expressed in the previous quotation, stating, quote, "These churches, the Orthodox, have an authentic doctrine, but it is static. It's petrified, as it were. They remain faithful to the tradition of the first Christian millennium, but they reject later developments on the grounds that Catholics decided upon these developments without them."
J Pendragon with the super chat, thank you. And he says, developed is not the right word, more like refinement and adaptation. Yeah. Yeah, it's not that we're changing core things about the faith. Obviously not. That can never happen. Nobody has the authority to do that. But, refining and adapting, being able to speak on current issues in an authoritative and universal way is very important. And that's what the Catholic Church does. Okay. So he goes on in this opening statement to maybe I can play another clip or two here, but he goes on to basically talk about what it meant in the first council, or what it meant in the first millennium, rather, to be one holy Catholic and apostolic. And he talks about how you can't say that everybody being in communion with everybody is required to be one, because there was all these issues in the first millennium of the church. There was all these internal schisms and things like this. So that's his kind of statement. So he's saying that if you're going to say that there can be no schisms, no internal schisms, otherwise the church is no longer Catholic, or rather one, then you'd have to say that the church of the first millennium was not one. So he's attacking a standard that he's expecting Alex to present, basically. And I thought it was a really good opening statement, actually. Hamar, thank you for the super chat. I like Heschmeyer's argument that you wouldn't expect the church to still be the same as when it was founded. The mustard seed has grown. Yeah, agreed. So I thought it was actually a really solid opening statement, because he's making a very strong case that if you're going to say that the Orthodox churches aren't one, then you have to say that the church of the first millennium wasn't one. Pretty strong case. I like it.
Sharing the same faith as Rome. On screen, you can see a map of what communion looked like. It was a mess. Third, during the so-called Acacian Schism, St. Macedonius II of Constantinople, St. Elias of Jerusalem, and St. Flavian II of Antioch, these saints had Orthodox doctrine and apostolic succession, but when they reached out to Rome requesting communion, they were rejected because they would not reject Blessed Acacius of Constantinople.
Yeah, so he talks a lot about this standard of they have to have apostolic succession and correct doctrine, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. Okay, so this is essentially, I think I've faithfully summarized his opening statement, and I'm trying to steel man it. I'm not trying to, make it sound stupid or something. Like, I think it was a really good opening statement. Okay, so then we could get into a lot, but we'll be here all day. This was a long debate. So let's do a little bit of Alex's opening statement. And his starts, I believe, around here. Or at least that's where I wanted to start talking about it.
With one. Jesus prayed for his church to be one in John 17, and St. Paul says there is only one body. But what does it mean to be one? In Acts 2:42, we read that the first Christians held steadfastly to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of the bread, and to the prayers. They were all united in matters of faith and worship. St. Paul also tells us that the local leaders of the church have true authority, while the book of Acts shows that these local authorities were all united under one universal authority, which was established by Christ in Matthew 16, Luke 22, and John 21.
Okay, so Alex here is presenting an argument that Scripture tells us that the church is meant to be one, and he gives all these characteristics for what does it mean for the church to be one. They're united in worship. They broke bread every Sunday. They were united in authority. They agreed on the authoritative structure and who their head was. So I think that's also a very strong case that if you're going to look at the ideal church, then you want to look at the church that Jesus founded, what Jesus had in mind for the church and the structure that he put in place and how that was first implemented before, there were schisms or disagreements and things like that. So let's see. I had another point that I wanted to get to here. No, actually, I'll just keep going.
So Christians are united in matters of faith and worship under a common governance. But is this what we see in the Eastern Orthodox Church? Are they united in matters of faith, worship, and governance? Let's look at each of these. When it comes to faith, we find that the Eastern Orthodox Church has internal disagreement and is not united. Eastern Orthodox bishops do not agree with each other on essential doctrinal beliefs. For example, they do not have a defined canon of Scripture. They cannot tell us how many books belong in the Bible. Some will say 73, others 76 or 81. Some will even say only 66. Why can't the Eastern Orthodox Church tell us how many books are inspired by God?
Yeah, so that is kind of a big problem. They get into this later on in the cross-examination section, where Ubi will say that it doesn't really matter to agree on a canon because really all a canon is what is permissible to be read during the liturgy. So it doesn't really matter. You don't really have to do that, but I think it does matter. I don't know. Uh, there are certain um, doctrines that you can get from some books that you're not going to find if you take those books out, or at least not going to find as plainly if you take those books out. So, for example, Martin Luther questioned famously the canonicity of um, Second Maccabees and the rest of the what we call now the Deuterocanon, which were never called the Deuterocanon before this dispute came up. But he questioned the canonicity of Second Maccabees because it so plainly taught purgatory and prayer for the dead and sacrifices for the dead. So he thought that getting rid of that book got rid of having to deal with that doctrine or what that text clearly teaches. So if you don't have some of these books in, which there are Orthodox churches, as Alex brings up in this, that have the same canon as Protestants, then it does change. It can change your understanding of certain doctrines if you don't have those books. I think that's really important. And then I'm not familiar with the other books, like there's an 81 book canon that some Orthodox churches hold to. I'm not familiar with what books are included in that, so I don't know, like maybe if there's some doctrines in those that aren't in the books that we would consider scripture. I'm not sure, but I do think that the canon of scripture matters, and I think it matters to define it very clearly and universally. So let's see. There's another clip soon after this one. It's coming up.
They need to provide one number, but the bishops cannot agree on what that one number is. Why aren't they one in this matter? How do we identify who's right and who's wrong? They are also not united in their soteriology. Some say that salvation can only be attained if one is a visible member of the Eastern Orthodox communion, and that there is no grace outside of it. Others say that there is grace outside of it, and even salvation, and others even go to the other extreme and believe in universalism, that everyone will be saved. In fact, universalism is becoming more and more mainstream as a belief in Eastern Orthodoxy, even.
Yeah, that is a problem. So, I mean, Ubi's entire response, or not entire response, I won't, simplify it that much, but a lot of his response to these things are, it's not important to define these dogmatically, or it's not important to define these universally. That's why there hasn't been a council held in the last 1,000 years, and that's why this stuff is kind of free for each person or each church, apostolic church, to decide for themselves because it's not that important. But I don't know how you could say that soteriology is not important. Like, how do we know if somebody is saved? That's pretty important. The Catholic Church has gone to great lengths to define that, holding to the fact that there is no salvation outside the Catholic Church, but also holding to the fact, as Scripture teaches, that if somebody is not in the correct faith because of reasons that are not their fault, then God may choose to save them outside of visible union with the Church. Um, it seems important to define stuff like that. Or Alex gets into later the idea that, or the fact that different churches in Orthodoxy are not united on how to receive new converts. If they were baptized in the Catholic Church or in a Protestant church, is it still valid, or do you need to rebaptize them? They don't agree on stuff like that. That seems really important to find agreement on. But Ubi is going to kind of play that down later on in the debate and say, well, these are things that it's not that important to define, and so that's why we haven't had a council on it or something. J Pendragon with the super chat. Let me see. It's harder for an oligarchy to stay in union when each member is in control of different rights instead of bishops having to stay in union with one church. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Definitely agree. Okay, there are a couple more examples on this that It might be gratuitous to play, but I think it's important. Let me see.
Who's right and who's wrong. Not only is there disunity in doctrines of faith, but they are also divided in their moral doctrines. The Eastern Orthodox are not united on the question of the morality of artificial contraception. Some Orthodox bishops refuse to call it intrinsically immoral and therefore allow for its use, while other bishops do call it intrinsically immoral and therefore say that it can never be used. If this is a matter of morality, which means that this can be harmful to souls, why can't the Orthodox Church come to one agreement on this matter? Contraception is either immoral or it isn't, and the true Church of Jesus Christ should be able to tell us whether it is or not. The Catholic Church
That's a very strong point. If contraception, some believe contraception, using it is a sin, and if you go to your death with unrepented sin, not looking good for you. So if contraception is an intrinsic evil and it can send people to hell, it can harm their souls, and some believe that that's not the case, well, it seems like you'd want to come to some kind of agreement on that between the Orthodox churches. That's a huge, important issue. You can't just brush that off and say, well, if you feel like that's okay for you, then go for it. But if you feel like it's not okay for you, then don't do it. No, the evil is objective. If something is evil, it's evil. Even if you feel like it's a good idea for you to do it, it's still evil, and you still will suffer the punishment for it in the afterlife if you don't repent of it and receive forgiveness through the sacraments. So this is man, it's really frustrating. It reminds me of, and I'm not okay. Everybody, relax. I'm not trying to be mean, but it does remind me of in Protestantism. There's disagreement about whether baptism actually is important or if it does anything. If it's a symbol. We talked about this last week on the stream. I released a video going into what the Bible and the early church has to say about it. But it's a big deal because some Protestants are teaching that, non-denominational, for example, they're teaching that baptism is just a symbol, it doesn't really matter. And other Protestant denominations are saying you will go to hell if you are not baptized. You should figure that out. Like, you might want to have some solid doctrine on that. Now, it's different in Protestantism because these are churches that don't even claim to be in communion with one another. They don't claim that they need to be in communion with one another. But if you're in an Eastern Orthodox church and you can't decide on something that could affect somebody's salvation, that seems like a big problem. And it's not enough to just brush it off and say, well, not a big deal, figure it out for yourself. No, that's what the church is for. The church is here to save souls. Okay. Let me see. Let me know if you guys are tired of watching clips, but this was an incredible debate. And I could watch, I've watched the opening statements, I think 3 times now. And I could watch them again and again.
who is right and who is wrong. A related issue is that of divorce and remarriage. The Bible and Christian tradition make it clear that divorce and remarriage is impossible, and that attempting to do such a thing is the sin of adultery. Many Orthodox bishops agree with this, but most Orthodox bishops today actually allow for divorce and remarriage up to 3 times.
Yeah, that's a problem too. Another thing that could be a salvation issue, someone who is in their third marriage perhaps could be committing the sin of adultery without even knowing it because their church says it's fine. And then what? It's putting people in danger with that kind of uncertainty. Matt, thank you, says, the church did not have an official canon for the first few centuries. Was the church fake? I'm genuinely asking. I'm Catholic. No. The first few centuries, there was a lot of debate about the canon. And as a practical thing, they wanted to solidify this because not only as a practical thing, but also as a matter of spiritual importance, because there were other versions or other, fake gospels that were coming out that were confusing people because they were teaching things like Gnosticism. So I think this was like, I can't remember which false gospel it was. I think it was like the Gospel of Thomas or something. Was created by Gnostics, and it was used to promote Gnosticism. So having this book float around and be considered scripture by a large number of Christians was leading to them believing a heresy, which is not a good idea. So it's very important to have a defined canon. Not that's not saying that the early church who didn't have a defined canon yet was a false church or something, but they obviously found it important to define it for a reason. So hopefully that answers your question. You didn't have to send another super chat for that. Fake was probably not a good term to use. Less authentic is better. Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense that they would want to define it because to prevent those heresies, like I said, but it's not as though they were fake or inauthentic or a less good church for not having a defined canon. But obviously, there was value in defining the canon, and that's why they did it. Just as before the church defined um, the two natures of Christ in hypostatic union or something like that. Before they defined that, it wasn't like the church was a less authentic church before they had defined that, but they found it valuable to define that to save people from believing heresies. Hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if it doesn't, and I will try again. If you guys are enjoying this, please make sure to like the stream. There are over 3 times as many people in here as there are likes, so if you don't mind, it's really fast, I promise. Okay.
Divorce and remarriage is adultery. It can never be allowed. So why do so many Orthodox bishops allow for it, and even up to 3 times? Why 3 and only 3 times? That seems like an arbitrary number. So they can't say how many books are in the Bible, but they can say up to how many times one can divorce and remarry. They justify this by appealing to...
So the thing that Alex keeps coming back to in his opening statement is, how do we decide who is right? So there's these disagreements on how many times one can be remarried or whether someone can be remarried in the first place, whether people need to be rebaptized when they come into the Orthodox Church. All of these different issues that are very important issues, salvation issues. There's disagreement on them. But even worse than there just being disagreement is, how do you determine who is right? So if one Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, says X about remarriage, and then you have the whatever other Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, says the opposite, how do we determine who is right between those two? That's a big problem because there's no central authority in the Orthodox churches. It's all of the churches together are authorities, but if they contradict each other, then do you just pick the church that you like, whose opinion you like more? You pick the church that agrees with you. That's what we see in Protestantism, because there's no central authority. So it's kind of just up to you to choose whoever you like more. So that's a problem. That's a big problem. And Ubie's going to keep coming back to, in his, cross-examination, he's going to keep coming back to the fact that, well, the first millennium had some problems. And even in the Catholic Church today, there's, disagreements or whatever. There's schisms in the Catholic Church today, with certain groups that reject the papacy and stuff like that, but still call themselves Catholics. But Alex will keep pointing back to, yes, but we know how to tell who is right. We know how to tell who is the true church, because the true church is in communion with the Bishop of Rome. That's how you know where the true church is. So if some Catholic sect, let's say the German bishops who have been a problem, obviously, in promoting, in trying to muddy the waters on very clear sexual issues that the church has spoken very clearly about, that the Bible speaks very clearly about, if they were to break off, God forbid, and form their own parallel church or try to, we would know, okay, well, are they in communion with the Bishop of Rome? No? Okay, so they're not the true church. Very easy. Very, very easy. And we just don't have that in Orthodoxy, which is a problem. So it's not the disagreements themselves that are the issue, but it is the inability to decide who is right based on any objective standard. That's the problem. Okay, so after Alex's opening statement here, let me see. We don't need to go through the whole thing, but when I was listening to this, I was like, man, this is a strong opening statement. This is really solid. I don't know how this guy's going to come back from this. Maybe Alex is just a really good speaker, and he's going to have something really good to come back with, and we'll see. We'll see how he does. J. Pendragon says the Orthodox churches sound more like different denominations than rites. Yeah, I mean, the Catholic Church has rights, but they don't have disagreements on doctrine the way that exists in Eastern Orthodoxy. Okay, so let's see how Ubie responds to all of this.
I'm good. Okay, are we ready? What was absolutely conspicuous in that presentation that you gave was that you cited absolutely nothing official. It was all just he says, she says. That was pathetic. That was awful. I mean, I expect that stuff from like Michael Lofton, but some Orthodox done did say that, and some Orthodox done did said this, but they ain't got no magisterium. Well, okay, so you need to actually cite official documents. So, all right, for example, which documents are you citing to show how churches receive people? You don't have any. I've read them.
So I just, okay, regardless of, let's say Alex was wrong about everything he just said. Let's say it was all hearsay and it was just garbage. To start a rebuttal by saying that was pathetic, that was awful, it's just not a good look. That's all I'm going to say. But I don't know if I have more clips from this that I want to show. Oh, yeah. So then basically he goes into, all of this was hearsay. He didn't cite any official sources. This is all just his opinion or stuff he's heard about online or stuff he's experienced personally, but it doesn't reflect the broader state of the Orthodox churches. And then he says, I lost my train of thought. I mean, basically throughout the, I can tell by this point, he's already kind of getting exhausted and getting annoyed, obviously, as we see with his first sentence there. But he just ends his time early. So he says that was pathetic. You don't have any sources. Oh, yeah. He goes on to say, like, I've had bad experiences at Catholic churches, so therefore I'm less welcome at a Catholic church than I am at an Orthodox church, even if the Orthodox church is of a different ethnicity than I am. So, where am I more welcome? Where is more universal if I'm not even welcome in this whatever Catholic church? To which Alex responds, well, yeah, you're a YouTuber that argues against Catholicism. People might be a little bit cold to you when you go to a Catholic church. Just as if I go to a Protestant church and people are a little bit rude to me or something, I'll be like, I get it, it makes sense. But then he just ends his time early. Like he doesn't, I think he only takes 10 minutes and then he's done because I think he's just too annoyed or too tired or something. So let's watch the end of his spiel here.
The three others were priests whom the emperor summoned and said, hey, how about you pretend to be these people? Which is why the Photine Council right away, one of the goals was to make sure that everyone accepted the Seventh Ecumenical Council. So by your standard, the first millennium just keeps failing. I mean, you would not do well in the first millennium church. I mean, you really wouldn't. We have a universal catechism. It was formulated in 1642 at Yasi. It's extremely boring, though. But I think you're overemphasizing what you consider the official catechism of the Catholic Church to be. It is not magisterial. It cites magisterial documents. It's updated regularly. You pointed out heretical patriarchs and bishops. There have been numerous heretical popes. I mean, we saw Vigilius, and he's council excommunicated him. He thought it was not acceptable to condemn people after death. He was wrong. You have Honorius. We have Pope St. Vitalian, who endorsed monothelitism and monoenergism for years until he finally turned around. We have Pope Liberius. Also, how do we know who the real Pope is? One of the standards is he's accepted by everyone. Okay, who? Anyway, I'm done.
So he still had like another 4 or 5 minutes to go before his time was up. But I don't know. Brett, thank you. Appreciate it. Didn't even say anything. You just sent a super chat. Let's see. J Pendragon says, the difference is that as long as you are validly baptized and not in mortal sin, you can receive communion in a Catholic church. Yes. That is not the same that you can't say the same for Orthodox churches. Okay. So not I mean, he made some points there. It's not as though he just, insulted Alex the whole time or something, but it wasn't a strong showing, in my opinion. All right. We don't have to get into too much more of this. I don't know if you guys are bored of this already. Let me see. 109.
It's there. at that Constantinople one. So what do you mean that they weren't in communion? He had legates there. That Arianism is more geographically widespread. So according to me, that would mean that Arianism is more universal than Orthodox Christianity. Well, paganism was more universally widespread than Orthodox Christianity during the time of the apostles. Does that mean that Christianity was wrong? Because the Christian church started with just 12 guys and a few other guys.
So I think Alex actually made a mistake in that statement. So you could see Ubie was agreeing with him if you looked at his face. So Ubie's point in saying that was, I don't know if Alex missed it or, in the heat of the debate, you kind of maybe misunderstand some things. I'm sure I would do a lot worse than both of these guys, so I'm not trying to insult anybody. But Alex is saying, okay, well, the Orthodox churches at one point had more bishops and were more geographically spread than the Catholic Church or something. So therefore, they were more Catholic at that point. But then we'd have to say that the pagan churches were more Catholic than the early Christians because there's only 12 guys and the people that they were trying to convert. But I think he's just making Ubie's point, because that was kind of Ubie's point, was that the standard of saying geographically dispersed and having larger numbers, if that's what makes you Catholic, then there are other religions that have been more Catholic than Christianity at times, and there have been times when the Orthodox Church was more Catholic by that definition than the Roman Church, the Roman Catholic Church. So I think he just misunderstood or something, but he kind of just reinforced Ubie's point there. So that was one of the points where it was like, okay, Alex kind of slipped up there, I guess, or just made a boo-boo, I guess you could say. The funniest part of the debate, my favorite part of the debate, was, let me find it here. So this is when, this was in the cross-examination. This was in Ubie's section of the cross-examination, and he was grilling Alex on whether or not the church of the first millennium had the same problems as the Orthodox Church today. And his point in arguing this is to say that if the church of the first millennium has the same problems as the Orthodox Church today, then it must mean that they have the same understanding of the church structure of that time. Because if you have the same church structure in the first millennium, you have the same church structure in Orthodoxy today, you would expect the same problems. So if the Catholic Church doesn't have those problems, then you'd have to say that the Catholic Church has changed its structure in some way to prevent those problems from continuing to occur, or something like that. So that was his point. And then they got into this whole back and forth about, are there any Catholic churches in North Korea or something? Let's see.
Universality means that it is present in all parts of the world, and Catholicism is present.
Is a
in every
Catholic
single
Church
country.
present in North Korea? No, it's not. Is a Catholic Church present in Antarctica?
No, not in Antarctica.
Because there's an Orthodox Church in each of those countries. All right.
Good, really good. Everybody give it up for Ubie. Got me with the Antarctica one. Those penguins.
That was gold. That cracked me up. I was driving and I was like, bro, I need to pull over. I'm dying. That was really funny. And that inspired me to make an image via AI that I will show you right now. I'm going to show you on my phone. That inspired me to make this, which I think is cute. Come on. It wasn't meant to be insulting. Don't get mad. I just think it's cute. Anyways. We got a super chat from Mark. Thank you. He says, it follows if the early church lacked a canon but was still authentic, Orthodoxy's stance makes sense. Truth rests on dogma, not strict canon uniformity. I feel like if you can't say which books are inspired by God, that's kind of an important issue that you'd want to find some agreement on. So just because the early church didn't have a universal canon before, what was it, the 4th century, that was when the council started speaking on the canon, which, by the way, that canon has been held to by the Catholic Church ever since that was defined. First, I believe, in like the late 300s, mid to late 300s, at the Council of the Synod of Hippo and Council of Rome, things like that. So those were, not universally binding canons or something, but they are the same canon that the Catholic Church has held to ever since, and it is only, other versions of Christianity that have deviated from that. But the other church lacking a definitive canon, okay, sure, I would even give up the canon issue to the early church or to the Orthodox. Okay, fine. The canon disagreement on the canon doesn't matter. Okay, how about disagreement on, how do you know somebody's saved? There are way bigger issues that need to be answered, but I think the canon is still important, and that's why the early church found it necessary to create a council to define that, because obviously that's important. Pendragon, thank you again. The Catholic Church has jurisdiction on the moon. That is true. That is true. That cannot be said of any other any other branch of Christianity. We got the Bishop of the Moon, who is from Florida, I believe. All right. Was there anything else I wanted to talk about in this debate? Let me see. Not really. So the reaction to the debate, like I said earlier, there's a debate about the debate. So people online are divided about who won, depending on who you ask. So I haven't personally encountered anybody who says that Voice of Reason lost the debate, but there are many people online, a lot of them Ortho Bros and such, who do believe that Voice of Reason lost the debate. I was telling my wife, because we were listening to it, and my wife I was like, I can't imagine Ubie thinking that this was a good debate for him. Even if he thinks he won, I can't imagine him being like, yeah, that was the perfect, that couldn't have gone any better. But I had a feeling even then, before I looked at anything online, that there's going to be Orthodox Christians online who are going to say, well, Voice of Reason only won because of his charisma and his command of the audience, and his speaking style, because he's very charismatic, like I said. But if you look at the issues and you listen to and you actually know what's being talked about, then you would know, if you were smart enough, that actually Ubie won. That's what I thought would probably be the reaction of a lot of Orthodox Christians, and I think that came true. Logan says, I don't think the Ortho Bros realize how repulsive their antics are. Straight up insulting your opponent during a debate is not Christ-like behavior. Yeah, I didn't expect that. Okay, so here's what some folks are saying. So Jay Dyer says, someone tell Voice of Reason I would love to debate him on papal geopolitics or Roman Catholic epistemology. Even that is kind of repeating the issue that kept happening during the debate itself, which was that Ubie kept bringing up problems in Catholicism, and Alex kept saying, we're not debating Catholicism, we're debating Orthodoxy. So Alex said at one point in the debate, pretend I'm an atheist. Don't even assume I'm a Catholic for this debate. Just pretend I'm an atheist, and we're just talking about Orthodoxy. I'm an inquirer into Orthodoxy, and I want to answer some of these questions. Just approach the debate that way. But Ubie was incapable of trying to turn the standard that Alex was putting forward, turn that standard against the Catholic Church. But even Alex could have said, okay, fine. For the sake of this debate, I will concede the Catholic Church is not Catholic or one. Okay, you still have the burden to prove that the Orthodox Church is. That is not what we're debating here. It's similar to, a lot of times I'll see, I don't know if you guys are familiar with God Logic, but I watch God Logic a lot. He argues with Muslims basically 24/7 on his YouTube channel, which is fun to watch. And a lot of times he will just concede things to go along with their argument and still show why their argument fails even after he concedes everything. So he'll say things like, okay, the gospel is corrupt for the sake of this argument. Okay, so then why does the Quran say to refer to the gospels to confirm the Quran if the gospels are corrupt? And he does that with a lot of issues. So he'll just concede what the opponent is saying, because he's saying, we're not arguing about whether or not the gospels are true. We're arguing about whether the Quran is true. So let's argue about the Quran. And we could toss out the gospels. I could agree for the sake of this argument that the gospels are false or whatever. Now let's talk about the Quran. So Alex was trying to get Ubie to do the same thing in this debate. Let's focus on an affirmative case for the Orthodox position. rather than arguing against the Catholic position. Even if you think my standard would demolish the Catholic Church, if it also demolishes the Orthodox Church, then you've still failed to fulfill your duty in this debate. So I don't think that came across for Ubie in the debate, and it shows that it didn't come across for Jay Dyer either, because he says here that he wants to debate Catholicism. He doesn't want to debate Orthodoxy, apparently. Mark, again, thank you. I'm Catholic, and honestly, I wish we weren't so soft. It's a debate, not a marriage. Direct speech isn't unchristlike. Truth can cut and still be love. I can see an argument for that too. I feel like when you go into a debate, you're kind of going into something formal. If you're having a casual conversation with somebody and things get heated and you call each other names at some point, I feel like you should be able to handle that and still be friends afterwards, even if you in the middle of a heated debate, like a casual debate, not a formal debate, you call each other names. But I feel like if you're going to a formal debate and most of the audience there were Catholics and this is their only representation of an Orthodox Christian, you want to put on a good face, at least for the sake of leaving a good impression that Orthodox Christians are kind people or something, or at least, I don't know, smart and respectful or something. So this is Pope Respector, great account. I highly recommend everybody go follow him on X. Says in response to this Jay Dyer tweet, and notice he wants to change the subject from "Is Orthodoxy true?" to something about the Pope. Why are they so unable to argue their case without doing it in opposition to Catholicism? Yes. So, for example, I mean, with Catholicism, I could make a case for Catholicism without ever referencing Orthodoxy or Protestantism. And I don't know that that is true of Protestantism or Orthodoxy. I mean, I'm sure it is. But to say, why be Catholic? You can go into arguments for the papacy using scripture, using the early church. You can go into arguments for apostolic succession, as I have on this channel, all kinds of different things. And you could make a case for why Catholicism holds to the scriptures and the early church. With Orthodoxy, you'd have to make a case against the papacy, really, because that's one of the main differentiators between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. I know there's more, but if you're going to say, okay, well, if I'm convinced of apostolic succession, both of these churches have that, how do I know which one is true? Orthodoxy has to argue that Catholicism has been corrupted in some way or something like that, and that's why you should come to us. Protestantism is a whole other world because they don't really care about apostolic succession, at least in the way that we do. Here's another section that somebody found was a strong one for Alex. Let's see. One thing I got to say is that the audio on this was awful. Whoever was in charge of the tech, could have done a better job. But nonetheless, we got the full debate that we wanted, so appreciate it.
Isn't unless everybody agrees on it, and
until
if
all
one
those
person
churches that were
disagrees.
until all those churches that were in communion prior to formulating an agreement.
So Ubie, is this the reason that the Eastern Orthodox Church hasn't been able to have an ecumenical council since the Great Schism? Because they can't agree with each other on what is and what isn't?
Or maybe we just don't think there's important issues to discuss.
So you think in the last 1,000 years, there have not been any important issues in over 1,000 years that the Eastern Orthodox Church has had to address in 1,000 years. We had 7 ecumenical councils in the first 700 years of Christianity, one every 100 years, but in 1,000 years, there haven't been any issues that the Eastern Orthodox Church needs to address. Thank you, Ubie. We got to move on because we don't have much time.
Oh, man. Yeah, the cross-examination was not good for Ubie. And to be fair, Ubie's cross-examination of Alex was very strong as well. But in this segment, so Alex is trying to press, why haven't you guys been able to have an ecumenical council when there was one every 100 years for the first 700 years? And then Ubie says there's nothing important enough, but then he kind of contradicts that, or does contradict that, not kind of, by saying, well, we did have councils, ecumenical councils in the 90s. So I don't know, like, maybe he didn't think of that when he first heard the question, but yeah, that's just not a strong part of the debate for Ubie. Thank you for the super chat. I don't think many people paid close attention Ubi said he went to the mean Catholic church when he was Catholic. He revealed his face 6 months ago. Okay. So they wouldn't have known that he's a YouTuber arguing against Catholicism. And at that time he was Catholic. Okay, well okay, sure. Yeah. There are some Catholic parishes that are not as welcoming as others, but they would still give you communion because you're validly baptized and you are in communion with the church. So that still doesn't fully make the point that he thought it was going to make, I think. Now, I think I have a clip also of Ubie's cross-examination of Alex. And honestly, I let me see. So it was, yeah, this is posted by Luigi, who is an Orthodox Christian. And this is basically, Ubi here is asking Alex a series of questions of, does the Orthodox Church have this problem? Does the Orthodox Church have this problem? Internal schisms and so on. Did the first millennium of the entire church have the same problems? If that's true, then the Orthodox Church is clearly holding to the same church structure as it was the first in the first millennium. So that was his whole point in this. And then Luigi says this part of the cross-exam was brutal. Voice of Reason concedes the Orthodox position several times in a row and doesn't even realize it.
Resulted in the emperor's handing control of the Balkans to the Church of Constantinople, who then refused to return it to Rome. This culminated at the Seventh Ecumenical Council when the Pope, in his letter, requested that the Church of Constantinople return control of the Byzantine Rite parishes in southern Italy and the Balkans to Rome. But the council simply ignored it. Can you think of anything similar like that in the Catholic Church today, or is that a problem the Catholic Church just doesn't have now?
No, the Catholic Church doesn't have that problem.
All right.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. No, you're right. They do.
Like what?
Well, we're not debating the Catholic
No,
Church.
no, I'm
so
asking,
it's irrelevant.
no, I'm asking because I'm attacking your standard right now. So we are debating your standard, and you don't want to, because you realize
Yeah,
that if we debate this,
the-
oh, hold on, wait, I'm the one interrupting because I'm asking you. Can
Oh,
you
you're right,
interrupt me? Yes.
Interrupt, yeah.
Thank you. No, we're attacking your standard right now because you're judging the Orthodox Church by the standards of the Catholic Church. I'm pointing out to you exactly why that standard is absolute nonsense. Okay, so what is it in the Catholic Church today that coalesces or is similar to the situation of Pope St. Boniface and the Church of, Pope St. Boniface getting into an argument with the Church of Constantinople?
Over territory?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Same situation. Can you think of anything similar to that now in the Orthodox Church?
Over territory?
Yeah.
Ukraine?
Okay, there you go. Can you think of anything like the Meletian schism within the Catholic?
So I guess this was like a major W for Orthodoxy because it has the same problems as the first millennium of the church. I don't see that as a strong argument, and I can't exactly articulate why. I think it's just that there were problems in the first century church that we don't have now necessarily. So like there were problems with Gnosticism, Docetism, which you could say there are Gnostic sects in Protestantism today, but it's not near the level of the problem that it was in the first century. I just don't. I feel like there are a lot of problems that exist in the early church that we don't have nowadays, and that doesn't show that we're not part of the same church or we don't have the same structure as back then. I don't know. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Maybe someone can help me understand more. Let's see. What are y'all saying in the chat? Disunity and inability to resolve issues is so based. I just don't know. Yeah, like that. I'm trying to steelman it. I'm trying to see what is the strong point here. We got Leo the 14th in the chat. Thank you so much, Your Holiness, for being here. Those we two churches under the Roman Emperor. Emperor was the arbiter. Now Orthodoxy has no arbiter. Yeah, exactly. That was the thing that kept coming up. How do we decide who is true, who is right? It's, again, the same thing in Protestantism where, people like my grandpa, who I love very much, who is a Protestant, he'll say things like, you need to go to a Bible-believing church. You got to be careful to not follow somebody who's not teaching the Bible. But then to that you could say, okay, if I go to one Protestant church and they claim to be a Bible believing church, they only hold to scriptures, sola scriptura, but they disagree with the church down the street from them that also claims to be a Bible believing church. They're a sola scriptura as well. How do we determine who's correct about their interpretation on any given issue? And you could say, well, you go look to the scriptures. And okay, well, but they can both make a very strong scriptural argument for their positions. How do I decide who's right? Especially for the average person who's not like, a YouTube apologist or even a theologian, especially. They're just like, okay, well, I don't know. This guy makes a strong case. This guy makes a strong case. How do I know who's correct? They contradict each other. They both use scripture. What do we do here? You got to be in communion with the Bishop of Rome. That is what the Catholic position is. So that is how you determine who is the true church. Yeah, Eric says all heretics use the scriptures and Satan uses the scriptures. Yeah, when Satan was tempting Jesus, he uses scriptures. Now, Jesus uses scriptures to respond, which is, I think, what a Protestant would say back. But also, Jesus is God, so he doesn't need a a higher authority than himself. He has perfect knowledge of everything. But for us average folks, what are we to do? If two apostolic churches disagree with each other, what are we to do? Just because we have a schism doesn't prove that you are a true church. That is true. Yeah. They're not the same problems. There are similar elements such as schisms, but these are common to both churches. Yeah, of course. Yeah, so there were things got a little heated on X after all of this went down. Let me see. I think who was it? I think Jay Dyer posted a poll, yeah, of who won the debate. And 61% of those who follow Jay Dyer say that Ubie won, and 38.5% say Voice of Reason. I don't know. I don't know about that. And then I posted similarly. There's my penguin picture. I think it's very cute. I posted who won, and we see 95% for this is expected. I mean, these aren't representative of anything accurate, especially this is only 70 votes compared to the like 3,000 votes that Jay Dyer's poll got. But I feel like this is just, okay, if you're a Catholic, you think the Catholic won. If you're an Orthodox, you think the Orthodox won. But even Jay Dyer's had a lot of people saying that Voice of Reason won, which I would expect, since I would think he has mostly Orthodox followers or something, or I don't know, maybe not. But I would expect an Orthodox to get like a bigger majority than that. But again, everybody, my team won, the other team lost really badly. It was terrible for them. But yeah. You should check the debate Jay had with Angelo. He kicked him, like physically kicked him or kicked him out. To be honest, I don't know much about the Orthodox because there are so many. Are they the ones that follow the Pope and follow the Byzantine rite? No, those are the Byzantine Catholics. So, or East, you might call them Eastern Catholics, but they are Catholics. They're part of the Catholic Church. They are in submission to the Bishop of Rome and all that good stuff. The Orthodox churches are Eastern as well, but they are not in union with Rome. Yes, Hallie does have a YouTube channel. Or Haley. That's not what I wanted. Haley has a YouTube channel, and she's great. Everybody should check her out. All right. Jay's a firebrand, so he probably has a pretty mixed follower distribution. Okay, as far as denominations go, still 39% is quite high. Yeah. Hey, we got a Byzantine Catholic in the house. I went to a Byzantine liturgy a couple weeks ago, and it was wonderful. I loved it. Cruz says Alex did great. His cross-exam put the nail in the coffin for Ubi. For everyone saying Alex used Reddit tier arguments, what does that say about Ubi not being able to answer? Ouch. Yeah. Okay. Kicked not physically. Okay. That's good. Don't kick people during debates, guys. So interesting stuff. Very exciting weekend. I don't know. I hope Alex is celebrating his victory. I think he won. I mean, come on. I think that was very clear. If not, I feel like to say Alex didn't win, you'd have to, like what I was saying earlier. Well, if you were smart enough, you would know that he didn't win because actually these arguments he was making weren't really good. So, but if you're not smart, then you're just going to think that he won because you're just too stupid to see what we see because we're way smarter than you. That's kind of the vibe that I get from a lot of the people saying that Ubi won. Which, fine. I mean, okay, whatever. I don't know, man. But let me see. I want to look at. There were some pretty heated posts in both directions about Alex, or about the debate, rather. I mean, look. My family has been, so this is a post by Luigi. He's posted a screenshot of a text message. My family been sending me this debate to prove orthodoxy is false. I watched it and it only made me doubt Catholicism more and prove Voice of Reason is a bit untrustworthy. I don't understand how you could come away with that. Maybe like an Orthodox guy will clip this and be like, look at this small brain Catholic over here or something. I don't know. I'm just not seeing what all of these people claim to be seeing. But again, my family's been sending me this debate to prove orthodoxy is false. I watched it and it only made me doubt Catholicism. So it didn't confirm orthodoxy, it just confirmed your rejection of Catholicism, is what I'm seeing from that. Which is not a great standard. J. Pendragon says, isn't the point of a debate to convince the layman? Yes. The point of the debate is to convince the layman. So if the average person watches this and thinks you lost the debate, thinks the other person was more convincing and presented better arguments, then that's how you know you lost the debate. How anyone can remain Roman Catholic after this is beyond me.
Bishops who removed his name from the diptycha.
The true church is anyone that was in communion with Vigilius.
Someone who was excommunicated.
He wasn't. His name was
removed.
His
name was removed. That's excommunication. They're no longer communicating with that person. If you do not communicate with a person, communion, they are excommunicated. Okay, so you are saying that someone who was removed from communion, who then later had to admit that they were wrong, that you had to be in communion with them to be in the true church.
Well, actually, he didn't admit that he was wrong.
No, he did in the letter to
Eutychius.
In the letter to Eutychius, which is in the Acts of the Council, he admits that he was wrong. He says he was led aside by Satan, and then he cites St. Augustine, saying this is an example of someone who admitted they were wrong. So again, if someone has been excommunicated, can a pope be excommunicated in the Catholic Church today?
Nope.
Okay, so you don't have the problems of the first millennium church.
Man, slam dunk. I guess we're cooked, y'all. So, I mean, yeah. I think Ubi had some strong points of the debate. I can't say that, Ubi got totally obliterated or whatever. I think personality-wise, Alex obviously was like way more charismatic and interacted with the crowd and things like that. So he kind of like ran the show as far as the audience went. But they both had very strong arguments on both sides. I just think Alex had more strong arguments that Ubi didn't really sufficiently respond to. And maybe you could say Alex didn't sufficiently respond to all of Ubi's points either. But yeah, Orthodox Pro is going to clip farm 60 seconds out of a 5-hour debate. Yeah, and I think they went back and forth on the same subject later. This is a fallacy. Not commemorating is not excommunication. Vigilius wasn't excommunicated. I think that's what they ended up later going into more detail about that. And Alex made, I think this was the same case that we're talking about. Alex made that point that he was not really excommunicated because he had like representatives at a council or something, which why would there be representatives of him at a council if he was excommunicated? Something like that. I can't remember all the nuances of the debate. Would love to see an orthobro like Ubi or Jay debate a rad trad. I would watch that, to be honest. That would be a solid debate. Do these debates help or hurt? In my opinion, these types of debates are futile. Yeah, I was thinking that too, especially now with the new pope. Everybody is talking about, reunification with the East. I wonder if this debate helps or hurts that. I'm not sure. Because on the one hand, it could help because there's dialogue. We're getting to know more about each other's positions, all of that great stuff. But on the other hand, it did get heated at times, and also the conversation afterwards online has been very heated. So I wonder if this helps or hurts the relations between the churches. I want to take a look at some of the comments under this video as well, if you guys don't mind. Let me see. Perfectly formatted as always. Of course. You would expect nothing less from a professional like myself. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. Yes, I've been trying to learn Latin, as you might see from my... What just happened? Okay. Bruh, I want to see the comments. Why are you showing me this? All right, let me figure this out. But yeah, the comments got pretty heated. Here we go. Found him here. I'm always curious what the comments under the actual video say about who won. Okay, so this person says the Catholic Church is in fact present in both North Korea and Antarctica. I didn't know that. My biggest criticism for the debate is that it did not open with prayer. Well, we don't know that. I mean, maybe they prayed before they started the stream. I don't know. Another super chat from Pendragon. Thank you. The unity of the East and West is not going to be affected by one debate. That's probably true. That's probably true. Okay. My side won. The other side got completely mogged. True. Alex won because he has a deeper voice. Beautiful debate. Voice of reason on another level. Big W for Alex. Whoever gets angry first loses. This voice of reason rebuttal is brutal. Stop, man. He's already dead. Ubie's disrespectful. Alex, awesome as always. So, I mean, the consensus from the comment section seems to be that Alex won.